Welcome to the MindGrowRadio Storyteller Series podcast. I am your host, Stephanie Kathan, and today's guest is a former stay-at-home mom to 5 kids who took a leap of faith and soared. She is an author, a business owner. She owns her own company. She's a community engagement strategist and the go-to expert for viral organic content. And I'm so thankful to call her my friend. Please help me welcome Cierra Lueck. Welcome, Cierra.
Thank you so much for bringing me on. I'm excited to be here.
Me too. And I've heard you share bits and pieces of your story as I've attended your workshops and I've attended trainings, and we had attended an event together. And getting to know you, you are such an amazing woman, and I'm like blown away by the way that you've been able to find balance with all of the things that you've got going on. And the one burning question I have is, what made you decide to take that leap into entrepreneurship?
I've honestly been doing entrepreneurial endeavors since I was a kid, which I think is the story for most of us that are entrepreneurs. We had something that was going on when we were younger that pulled us into that. So for me, I kind of grew up around entrepreneurs. Apparently, I didn't know this until much later in my life, but my biological father, who died when I was less than a year old, he had 3 different businesses when he passed away, and I don't remember what all of them are. I know for sure one was like a mechanic shop that he owned, and I know that his parents owned, they had the assisted living facilities, like the #1 assisted living facility in the area where we were at, so they owned the assisted living facilities. And then my mom's parents owned their own HVAC shop that they'd built from the ground up, and they'd had a bunch of entrepreneurial endeavors. So my mom got a job that she worked at for 29 years, but also on the side, she always had some kind of I don't know, Mary Kay or Avon or Amway or something that she was trying to do to supplement her income. And the man that she remarried that I call my dad, he was a piano tuner for a while, had his own piano tuning business, and then he was also in bands. And so I was just completely surrounded by entrepreneurs. And then my mom's best friend, who was like a second mom to me, she was like my aunt. She had her own seamstress business, and she used to make these really high-end wedding dresses, and people would pay her $10,000, $15,000 to make these wedding dresses. And again, this was when I was a kid, so 20 years ago, people were paying those prices. So I can't even imagine what those dresses would be now.
Crazy. And so it's kind of in your blood, like in your DNA to have that spirit. Some people, I feel like it's a calling, and I think that's that with you. You were surrounded by it. It's something that comes natural, a natural step forward. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a way of life.
When you decided to do this, I've heard you talk about being stuck in that entrepreneur brain, that feeling of being held back because there's more ideas than time or team members to delegate to. And how were you able to shift from that mindset into the mindset of moving forward and organization and creating? Look what you've created. It's amazing.
Well, first off, thank you. Secondly, as far as shifting mindset around entrepreneur brain, it depends on what people call entrepreneur brain. So what I call entrepreneur brain is when you have so many ideas and you don't know what to stick with. So my favorite way to address this or bring this up is to imagine that you know how they say throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what'll stick? Imagine that you've got this amazing bowl of spaghetti that you just spent all of this time creating, and you're like, okay, I'm going to see if this is ready to stick. And so you take your spaghetti, you throw it at the wall, and you're looking at the wall, you're waiting for it to stick. But in the meantime, you see this other bowl of spaghetti that you also could use and that's been made, and you're like, oh my gosh, okay, I'm going to go grab this bowl and let's throw this at the wall, and you're throwing it at the wall in the same spot, trying to see if that'll stick too, but in the process of throwing the spaghetti at the wall, you're knocking the other spaghetti down, and so you never know if the first spaghetti's stuck. And the biggest thing that I've found is that if people just take one idea and stick with it and run with it. It doesn't matter what idea, because I had this ridiculous idea when I was in junior high. I was just like, I loved going to the vending machine at games and, on the weekends and in the evenings, and you'd go to the vending machine, you get this drink and the snack, and I was like, man, it'd be super cool if there was like a vending machine for DVDs. Like, that would be super cool. And like, we don't even really use DVDs anymore, but then like 5-10 years later, there was Redbox.
Right.
And so somebody somewhere had the idea, took it, and ran with it. And now, like, Redbox is obsolete. But, I mean, imagine if I'd had the wherewithal to just actually be like, this is not just only a cool idea, but I could probably bring this around. I mean, I just saw something yesterday where it was talking about the Wright brothers. I don't remember where I saw it, but it was probably in a meme dump that my husband sends me in the evenings. But the Wright brothers, when they decided that they were going to test flight and actually have liftoff off of the ground and fly, I want to say it was just 3 days before, it had been printed in a newspaper that it would take 1 million years for anyone to be able to fly, of scientists and mathematicians to figure it out, of them all working together. So flight was impossible. And that was just 3 days before. And the thing is that when we have those ideas inside of us, the very fact that the idea even exists means that it's possible. And so then it's just up to us to have one decision that we stick with and that we see it through to fruition. And I tell people typically when entrepreneurs are just getting started, I tell them, give it at least 90 days of going all in on it, not 90 days of like, okay, well, I'll put out a couple things here and there and see if it works. Because if you're not going to go all in, what's even the point, right? So I tell them to pick at least 90 days. But if you think about the great men and women over time throughout history that have stuck out in history books, they were all in and committed to something that they didn't care if they failed over and over and over and over again for way longer than 90 days. So, I mean, sticking to 90 days is really not that long compared to someone like Thomas Edison, who had 10,000 tries before he got the one working light bulb. It's 9,999 failures. That did not happen in 90 days. That took way longer than 90 days. He was committed. And then the same thing with Henry Ford, I believe. He wanted, I think it was when they were working on, and somebody out there who knows vehicles better than me, please correct me if I'm wrong, but the 7-cylinder engine or something like that, he had his people work on it. And I think it was like either 3 or 6 months. They were working on this for 3 or 6 months. They came back. They told him it's impossible, because he was like, where are we at? And they were like, it's impossible. And he's like, try again. And they tried again, and it was impossible. And they tried again, and then they did it. They created it. And it's one of those things that's like, some people will just not make a decision to pick one thing that they're going to focus on and go all in on. And if you will just pick one thing, focus on it, go all in on it, the possibilities are absolutely incredible. And the flip side of accomplishing that, it's so good, not just for everyone else in the world, not just for the ingenuity of the industry, but it's good for you, because if you accomplish that one time, something that you thought was impossible for you, you accomplish it one time, what precedent do you set for your future? Because now you know inside of you that anything is possible.
Yes, so true. It's so important, so important. Sometimes we get derailed and we get distracted, and we allow ourselves to find many excuses sometimes. But sometimes life happens, And I know that on your journey, you had some pretty, life-shaking events go on with your family and with your son and some health problems that he had. How were you able to, stay grounded when so much stuff was going
on? That's a great question. First off, I wouldn't ever have articulated that I stayed grounded. I would not have ever said that. I would have said that, I gave up on everything. I would have said that I completely lost it. I would have said that I let my emotions get the best of me and that I just leaned into it. I've always been a person who's worn my emotions on my sleeve. And so in that time, I would divulge into crying and divulge into tears multiple times a day. And I know that there was a point where I started taking that to my closet and coming out and being an inspirational, motivational speaker for my family just because I knew that my family needed that. But that's not how I started. I had 2 months of just feeling upset, being angry, having tears, leaning into my emotions. And I think that not enough people allow their emotions to be expressed, and they just bottle it up and store it inside. I personally went through years of traumatic experiences, so that wasn't the first. It was definitely the hardest that I've experienced in my life up to this point. But it wasn't the worst, it wasn't the only one that ever happened. I experienced so much death from the time that I was born. My biological dad died when I was less than a year old. My nanny died when I was 9 years old, and she was a second mom to me at that point. A couple of years later, when I was 11, both of my mom's grandparents, who I was very close to, I saw at least once a month for several days, sometimes a couple weeks, they passed away when I was 11 years old, both of them, one the day after Thanksgiving, the next the day after Christmas. And it was a very traumatic experience for my mom. And so I experienced that. And then 2 years later, when I was 13, my grandma, who's my biological father's mom, she passed away, and she was the glue that held that side of the family together. And so then I became very disconnected from that side of my family. And I had a best friend growing up who was my cousin. He was a brother to me. And when I was he got into drugs, and so I distanced myself from him because I didn't want that lifestyle and I didn't want to be around it. I didn't really like the people who were into that stuff. And a few years later, when my first daughter had just been born, he never even got to meet her because he OD'd of drugs inside of a bathroom somewhere. And I was really angry that that was the way that he chose to die because he was brilliant and smart and funny. And he was so talented, and I loved him so much. And he just chose a very different path for his life than I chose for mine. And so, you go through trauma. Trauma is going to happen. Bad things are going to happen. Bad things happen to good people, and good things happen to good people. Bad things happen to bad people, and good things happen to bad people. Bad and good things, it's a part of life. And when you allow yourself to just really feel the emotions, it's we actually have to work through the emotions. There's this emotions wheel that's got 7 emotions on it. And essentially we have this neutral state of life where we're just content, we're satisfied, everything's good. And then the second emotion is we're a little bit annoyed, and it's kind of frustrating, but we're a little bit annoyed, so we're not annoyed enough to do anything about it. Then we get to this point of lots of pain, and we're oh my gosh, what is happening? Why is this here? We're still kind of in shock. Then we get to this point of rock bottom. And when we get to this point of rock bottom, we're still not in a state where we're ready to do anything about it. All of the emotions up to this point, we are not making any kind of effective change or progress or innovation. At the point of rock bottom, it's when people are just complaining and they're frustrated and they just want somebody to listen to them and they kind of want to wallow in it a little bit. But then there's this tipping point right after rock bottom where you get fed up, you get frustrated, and there's this determination that builds inside of you. And when this determination builds, that is when the shift happens. That is when action starts taking place. That is when you start searching for answers, searching for change, searching for innovation. So I don't know what number we're on in terms of like how many emotions I've listed so far, but after that determination, after that comes the excitement of being able to make things happen. What number are we on? Do you know? I didn't even write them down. I'm just shouting this off the top of my head. So we started with satisfied. I'm just going to write it out on paper so that I know. It always helps me. So if you're listening, take notes.
Writing now.
We start with satisfied, we go to annoyed, then the next one is we're in pain. Then the next one is we've hit rock bottom, which is number 4. Then the next one is determination, which is number 5. Okay, so we're not quite excited yet. So at the determination, now we are, I'm sorry, before determination is more of the, like, pissed off, I've got to do something, then we move into determination. That's what it is. So there's the two emotions right there, and then the last one is excited. And when we're excited, we're not making changes anymore. And that's the thing that people have to realize, like, this is kind of like an emotional innovations wheel. So at the point that we get to being excited, we are no longer making changes. So there's really only 2 emotions. It's that, like, I'm angry and something has to change right now, or the determination where it's like now you're kind of like in a good headspace, because there's anger where it's like I'm running away from, and there's determination where I'm running towards something. And so with those 2 emotions, that is out of all the 7, those 2 emotions is the point where we're making changes. And so this is when we're relying on our reactive state to be the thing that brings change into our life rather than being proactive. But again, if something's just kind of annoying and it's kind of a nuisance, we don't really do anything about it until it becomes like really exacerbated. And so what we can do to fabricate this on a regular basis is we can actually bring ourselves to the point of being angry about it, finding a reason to be angry about something that we really want to change, so that we can move ourselves through that emotions wheel faster. Like we don't actually have to wait to have a lot of pain or to hit rock bottom. We don't have to wait for those points. Oftentimes that's our patterns, and that's what we do, is we wait for that rock bottom point, but we don't have to. We can proactively fabricate that anger and determination, because that's the point of change. Yeah. And I think that that's not something that I've learned until like the last year or 2. And I did some of it naturally, but I would wait for those rock bottom points. And so for me, during that time with my son, that was like a rock bottom point, but it took me 2 months of being at rock bottom before I actually started pursuing my business. I didn't do it overnight. I wasn't extremely proactive. I was very reactive, and I was living in that reactive state back then.
But look what you've been able to create from that. You have your own company now. You have a team of people who work for you. You've helped hundreds of business owners. Like, you are kind of what I want to be when I grow up. Like, you are, from where I see you, from what I see, you are like, I hang on your every word. When you are offering something, I'm like, yes, I'm there, because you are genuine, and you are authentic, and you are brilliant, and you bring all of these pieces of you together and shine the light to show us who have been where you are how to get through, how to get there. And yeah, I'm fangirling, and I totally adore you, in case you didn't know.
Well, I appreciate you, and I'm really excited about where I am, and I'm working on not being content with where I am in such a way to where it doesn't cause me to make progress and movement forward. And what I'm working on and what I'm working into right now is actually being content with the process that moves me forward. So finding satisfaction in the process that moves me forward in the direction that I desire to go. There's a really interesting concept. There's a song by Russ. He's a musical artist. You can find him on Spotify. I don't remember the song off the top of my head, but I was listening to it the other day, and I was listening to some of the lyrics, and he was talking about the concept of not wanting to guilt and shame himself into the victory. And I thought about that, and I took a step back, and I thought, whoa, like, what would it look like if we didn't guilt and shame ourselves into the victory? Because oftentimes entrepreneurs, and we talk about this a lot, like it's very widely talked about in the entrepreneurial space and in business in general, is when we set these targets and then we hit the target and we're so focused on the target and like, I'm not going to be happy until I hit the target. And then once we hit the target, we're happy for a moment, and then that moment is gone because we already hit the target. What else do we have to be happy about? Because then we have to set the next target. Or sometimes we're chasing after a target and we get really close to hitting it, and then we move our target further away and we never hit it because we just keep moving the target while we're running. And that's like a really difficult space to live in. But the thing is that like mentally, to live in mentally, the thing is that most often we are guilting and shaming ourselves into that victory. So along the way, like for example, if we're trying to lose weight, we might set this weight loss goal or this weight loss target, and then every time we don't go to the gym, we're like, oh, if you don't go to the gym, you're lazy, you need to get your ass up and go to the gym. And so in the process of wanting to achieve this goal that we know is going to be good for us, we have a really big why behind it. You know, people always sit down and they figure out, well, what's your why? What's your why? Why is it important to you? Well, that's great, but if you're guilting and shaming yourself into it, then you feel bad every time you go. And so you're not even enjoying the process because you're guilting and shaming yourself about it. Or it's like if I don't make X number of sales, then I suck at business and I'm a failure. And it's like, so I have to hit this target every week. And when I don't hit it, what am I? I'm a failure. You know, and we're putting these thoughts and these ideas inside of our head so that when we do finally hit the target that we were wanting, whether it's the weight loss or the amount of money that we bring into our company or the size that we grow our company or the number of people that we serve or support or help or whatever, when we put ourselves into that position, into that place, we've now made it to where we are in pain when we win, and winning is no longer fun, and we lose all the zest for life. And it's like, this is, I believe, a really big part of why people struggle with mental illness and depression and anxiety and stress, is because we're setting these targets that we want the target, we like the target, we love the idea of having whatever the target is, but the process to get there, we're not falling in love with the process because we're guilting and shaming ourselves there. It's like we have to grind it out. We have to work harder than everybody else. We have to do more than everybody else. And it's like, yes, in some cases, there might be people that are very motivated by that, but that is not the majority of the population. The majority of the population is not motivated by outworking other people.
So do you have some tips that you can share of what helped you to stay balanced when that was happening to you, like ways that you were able to get back into alignment with who you really were instead of like derailing into that shame and guilt?
I'm still learning it. I'm still working on it.
It is a process, right?
Yeah, the biggest thing that I'm doing right now is just bringing awareness to when I have tension over something and asking myself why that tension is there. Like sitting with myself and allowing the thinking time. Thinking time is probably the one thing, and it's like people think that they think, but they don't actually think. I love the way Earl Nightingale talks about it. It's The Strangest Secret. You can listen to it for free on YouTube. In The Strangest Secret, he says, men simply don't think. He's like, they think that they think, but they're not actually intentionally thinking, because our mind is always running. Our mind is just a computer. It's always running. But until we do something intentional with our mind, it's just processing information. Like my son, we didn't really talk about the story, but when my son burned his hands and he got 2nd and 3rd degree burns on his fingers and palms, and we found out later it was because of the brain tumor, and it was because of a seizure that he was having because his brain was growing around this benign tumor. When we found all that out, it's like it suddenly made sense that the reason why he picked up the hot pan when he was having the seizure was because his brain had already inputted information on autopilot that later he would be cleaning the pan, so he picked it up and turned around and took it to the sink. Like his body was just already pre-programmed to do that later. And it's one of those things that our brain is just running on autopilot all the time. And until we intentionally give it something to run after or run towards, and we sit down and allow ourselves the time to outline a plan, draw out information. There's a really good book called The Road Less Stupid. And The Road Less Stupid, the whole point of the book is it just teaches you how to think, how to create thinking time every single day. So what you could do if you wanted to is you could take that book and just go through one chapter a day, and it will teach you how to intentionally think.
And that is a really, really powerful tool. Cierra, can you share with the folks where to go to learn more about you and what you do and tap into your energy out there in the world?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on any social media platform. I am the only Cierra Lueck in existence, so it's Cierra. My last name is Lueck. Lueck. I don't know, people call it Luke, Lucky, all that kind of stuff. But Cierra Lueck, you can find me on Facebook is where I post most of the time. And I also have a website, CierraLueck.com. You can go to my website at any point. We've got, like, all of our new information will be up on the website whenever we have anything new and relevant for you.
It has been so fun chatting with you today. Thank you so much for joining us. We have been here listening to the wisdom of Cierra Lueck, and she has just, like, grown my mind in 100 different ways. I do have notes. I'm so excited about this emotional innovations wheel that you shared, and I have a feeling I'm going to be using that more and more and more. And I just want to encourage the listeners to please go check out Cierra. Please tap into her. You're going to be so glad you did. If you're a group leader, you definitely want to get into her Group Leaders United Facebook group. Go check that out. You've been here on the MindGrowRadio Storyteller Series podcast. I'm Stephanie Kathan. We've been joined by very special guest Cierra Lueck, and we will see you on the other side. Thanks so much, everybody.